Oh yeah, baby. Here we go. Alrighty then, the new coupler is on. You can see as I turn this, there is no play. Either the V6 version, the one that says it's for the V6, or the Eaton one, which is the brand name that I have put a link in the condition description below, will work. Now let's take this thing, set it on the engine. Intake is on. There are 4 10mm bolts on each side. Remember that there is locating dowels right there in the center, and your throttle body coolant hose, which runs right along here. I don't know if it's in the frame. Yeah, it is. It goes underneath and clips in. Those clips are probably going to break on you. I got one left. The other one broke. So clip that hose in there as you set it on. And I just got the throttle body on here, loose here. Now, I'm going to work on the back of this engine here to get the rest of the electronics and coolant hoses and this thing bolted down. Well, actually, this doesn't bolt down until the top goes on, but there's a piece that goes here that has some changeover valve and whatnot. You got to plug some things in. There's the what I believe is the manifold air pressure sensor. So I'm gonna work on getting some of this stuff plugged in, and I'll get back with you. Okay, it's tight fit on that. I had to take this coolant pipe, this crossover pipe, back off in order to get this in there, and plugged in the manifold air pressure sensor. Got the changeover valve here plugged in, electronic connection back there. Had to put a new vacuum line on this. I just ran a traditional, generic vacuum line from here down to the solenoid that it actuates. Because this line here is hard. It's got like rubber elbows and then a hard plastic line that's very brittle, just cracked on me. So put a new one of those on there. Let's see what else. Clipped on the coolant outlet pipe here. This is for the heater core. And then there's a bolt here for that bracket. All right, I think that's about it to talk about on this. Let's get the top of the supercharger on. Okay, there is the top of the supercharger on, along with the wiring bracket and everything back here. Much easier to get this on now. Can't believe I got this thing off with it in the car. This is pretty convoluted back here. So I'm glad this is all straight back here and I don't have to contort my body to get that stuff off. I'm going to take you a tour around what I did here. T40 Torx, tons of little ones going all the way around. Right here in the middle, you got 10mm bolts. They go in the middle of this thing. And then on the front, you got some really long ones. There's a really long one that goes there and a really long one that goes here. Then you can see that I've wired it up, brought the wiring harness across here, wired everything together. Finished bolting the throttle body back down, tightening it down against the intake there. I think that's just about it. I think this engine is heavy enough in the stand. I was going to put the oil filter housing and the water pipe in here, along with the fuel rail across here. But I'm going to just leave well enough alone. This is good enough to get in the car. The way you lift this engine in is placing a bolt in here and lifting it from it. And with the strap going around here to lift the engine up, I didn't want that oil filter housing on yet. So we will lift this thing out of the stand and get the rear main seal on. Oh, but first, a couple extra minor things. I'm putting the exhaust manifold on here on the driver's side. These are like ribe bits. They look like Torx, but they're ribe the way that they are machined in there. I think it was like a T50, T55, somewhere in there. This is not going to be a common tool you're going to have. So go get a ribe socket set. Okay, then I'm going to put the heat shield on here. Okay, the heat shield is on. You have a Torx bolt here. You have a 8mm screw there. One right underneath. Actually, it's hard to see. I'm touching it right there. And then one on top back here. I'm going to go ahead and put the bracket. I keep calling it a power steering pump. It's actually for the dynamic suspension that's got hydraulically controlled sway bars. So I'm gonna go and put that bracket on here. Okay, now let's bolt this thing in to the cherry picker, lift it out of the stand. We'll get that flywheel back off, get the rear main seal on, and then get the flywheel back on, and then we'll work towards setting this thing in the car. Engine is out of the stand and down here. First thing I'm going to do is remove the last of the timing tools. We haven't needed them for a while, but just haven't gotten around to pulling them out. Now's the time to pull them out. So right here where the crankshaft position sensor goes, I'm going to pull that out. Pull the bracket that locks the flywheel where the starter goes as well. Once the timing lock tools are off, take the rest of the bolts out that you had in here to lock it while doing the timing procedure, and then pull the flywheel off. Now we're going to put the rear main seal on. So usual stuff, just ran a razor blade around here, cleaned it up. Then I brake cleaned it, made it nice and clean, oil free. Put a dab of Permatex Ultra Gray here and over there. That's basically where the oil pan meets the block. Then we will set this rear main seal. And there's the rear main seal on. They sell a special tool to get this on, but if you're good, you don't need the tool. Basically, it's a pretty flimsy rear main seal. So work it on a lip and then kind of push up on the thing and tuck it around as it goes in, and just be gentle. You don't need the tool. It's all bolted on here with the 8mm bolts. Now let's put the flywheel on. Okay, the manual states that you should only use these bolts 3 times. So the first time would be from the factory. Second time would be now. They could be used 1 more time. You're supposed to put a punch in here, so you've marked it that they've been taken out once. I guess from the next owner. I'm gonna leave it. Okay, I did put in the timing lock tool, just one of them down here, just to hold that just a little bit while I crank those down. All right, I'm ready to lift this engine up and in. The last 2 things I did was turn the engine over by hand just a scotch so that the bolt hole for the torque converter lines up right in the center of the hole here, so I'll be able to get right to the first bolt. And then also, this is completely optional, but I've found this in the past to be worthwhile. So I'm trying it on this one as well. You'll see here I've made basically some locator pins. I just put in some bolts and then just cut the heads off the bolts. These are basically pins that'll help me find the transmission and slide it in as we lower this into the car. Okay, I'm gonna put this engine in the car. Whoa, mama, that took some effort. It's in, and I've done actually a lot of things. Instead of pointing, saying do this, doing it, and then showing you the result, I'm just going to show you the result of multiple things. First off, as this engine is going in to mate back up to the transmission, you do have to be careful because of that oil sump is so large in the back there. You can't really go in at an angle. You've got to go in and then down because the differential is in the way. But this is going to be a little bit of a bear back here. You got that plastic wiring that's back here was getting caught on here, so as I'm lowered, and I'm literally having to kind of push on the crankshaft pulley here a little bit to walk it in. All right, so after dropping it in, I put all of the transmission bolts on. I bolted up the exhaust, I bolted up the starter, and I bolted up the oxygen sensors that go on the side of the transmission. And I bolted the flywheel to the torque converter. Let me show you each one of those. This is hard to film, so I'm probably going to end up showing you some pictures of these transmission bolts from the manual. It'll just be easier. You can obviously see one down here on the oil pan, another one over there that goes in the starter, and you work your way up here. There's one right there. and one right there, and then they just keep going around. Some of them have the threads on them for different things. Like this one here is holding a vent tube, and you can see another bolt above that. That's just a plain 13mm bolt. Then there'll be another one above that. That's another thread one. That's another holder for that vent tube. Bolted up the exhaust, 15mm nuts. You can get this one from down here. I ended up getting that one with a swivel and a few extensions from the front. Same thing on the other side. One of them you get from the back, the other one swivels and extensions from the front. Okay, what else to show you as I go around here? There's a plug right here. This plug, you're going to have to remove it to get to the torque converter. And you just move the torque converter by hand until its hole lines up with the flywheel hole. I had mother-in-law actually come out and sight it for me so I could spin this torque converter while she was looking for it to line up. Keeping on moving around here, the starter is back in. Basically all you have to do is plug in the solenoid. I left the main power wire to it. You just have to plug the solenoid back in, and then you got a 13mm bolt there, and then there's a 13mm bolt underneath this heat shield. I'm pointing at it right here. And then I put the heat shield on. Then don't forget it's got this funky bracket in the back here. You got two 10mm bolts up behind here, and then one right there that's really hard to get to. Alright, that's just about it from underneath here. I guess I could show you. There is some heat shields over the oxygen sensors. I'm touching it right here. This heat shield covers the connector for the oxygen sensor. There's that one on this side, and then there's one on the left-hand side as well. Alright, let's go back up front. Alright, you will need, well, you don't need, but I recommend putting a blanket across the engine. And then I just stepped up here and went back behind here to get all of the transmission bolts. Not much room, but you can feel your way back there. So here's some pictures of the transmission bolts. Here is the left side. There's the bolts for the left side there. Here is the right side. Bolts for the right side. Then there's a bracket that you got to put on. It's for like the breather vent for the transmission. Okay, what else? What else did I do? I'm trying to think here. It's really, oh, one other thing I did was the bracket here. There's a T30 bolt for these transmission cooler lines that come in. All right, now I think I have to do the ground strap. I'm going to put the ground strap back on. Somewhere back here, let me grab it. There it is. I'm going to put this ground strap back on for the engine. Oh, I forgot. Let me show you. I don't think I'm going to be able to show you, but I'm going to try my darndest. Here, let me grab my flashlight. Way in the back here, you can see the outline of it. Let me just try to draw the outline of it for you here real quick. That's the plug where the rubber plug where the torque converter bolts go. This is really hard to do. Now it's almost impossible now that I have the transmission cooler lines bolted up. So with those down, I was able to get a long extension. When I say long, I mean like 4 12-inch extensions. And one of them, the last one, I just used this this beveled edge here. Allows the socket to rotate a little bit on it. Okay. Did those 4 extensions to make it all the way to the back there. Now I'm going to just do some random stuff. No particular order in what I'm doing here. I could put on the alternator, and then the AC compressor, and the dynamic suspension pump. But I think I want to finish off the top here. I'm going to put on the oil filter housing here, along with the last of this coolant pipe around here. And then I think I'll work my way down. Okay, going in order here. Not necessarily has to be this order, but I did the coolant pipe. You will have to get new hardware for this, or use different hardware. I needed shorter bolts. The plastic original one is much thicker right here, and this is thinner. So I put a shorter bolt in there, and also in there back here. Put in the oil filter housing with the gasket, new oil filter. Put in the fuel rail crossover pipe. So over here, there's a 17mm nut. You follow it around here, there's a T30s that hold it on here to the top of the supercharger. And then on the other side, there will be another 17mm nut over here that you'll want to tighten up. Let's see what else. Did one vacuum line just because it looked like it should go ahead and start getting in here. Right here, it's actually an evap line, not a vacuum line. Snakes underneath this fuel rail and goes to the purge solenoid. Plug that in, let that chill up there. All right, now I think I'm gonna move on down to the alternator. I'm gonna get the alternator out. Here's the main power cable for the alternator. Here is the computer alternator turn on signal wire. Before I put the alternator in, I did put the ground strap on. It's back here. There's a 10mm bolt. I'm touching it right there. Kind of hard to see in the frame, but get that on before putting the alternator on. All right, alternator going on next. All right, there's the alternator on, and while I was over here, I just went ahead and put this idler pulley on. Now we're going to swing over, moving on to this side over here. We're going to get the AC compressor on and this dynamic suspension pump on over on this side. All right, and the air conditioning compressor is on. There's 3 bolts. Here's the bolt. And then don't forget to plug it in back there. Now, I was about ready to put on this active suspension pump up here, and I realized that there was just a lot of grime and stuff around here, and I was thinking, hey, maybe it was just this this cover here that was leaking, and by resealing it, that I wouldn't have any issues. But that's not true. This pump up here, this is for the active stabilizer bar, puts out quite a bit of pressure. This is the active stabilizer bar right here. This puts out a lot of pressure, and as I was spinning this thing, fluid was just coming right out of the shaft, so this seal is gone. And this thing is crazy expensive. From the dealership, it's like $2,000. You can find some rebuilt ones for like $1,500. My local dealership has one in stock. I'm going to go chat with them here and see what I can get this thing for. Okay, good news. Well, at least the best news possible considering the part I had to replace. These things are nothing more than a high pressure power steering pump to move these stabilizer bars, and they are incredibly expensive. So the dealership wanted $1,925.50 for this pump. I know, crazy, right? Almost $2,000 for that thing. Then on top of that was a $400 core, and on top of that would be tax. Of course, you don't pay tax on the core, but anyway, I think the original quote was $2,600 or something like that. And then I bartered with him on the phone, said, hey, give me the wholesale price. You know, this part's crazy expensive. He's like, yeah, I can give you 10% off and make it $1,730 instead of $1,925. I'm like, all right, I'll be up there in a little bit. And then I looked online a little bit more and found one out of a dealership in Chicago for like $1,500, and they matched the price. So, and I didn't have to pay the core charge because I just took my old one in. So out the door, $1,640. Not bad considering that salvage yards want like $1,000 to $1,200 for these things. So I guess I feel pretty good about it. Anyway, very expensive part. Hopefully yours is not bad. Let's put the lines on this thing and install it. Right before I do that, though, I'm going to take this suction hose for the pump and tip it down into a bucket and drain all the fluid out of this reservoir so I can replace it with some new fluid. Let's get all that done right now. Okay, the pump is on. Here are the bolts for it. Okay, now let's do the belts. Let's get the idler pulley on, the tensioner pulley on, the other idler pulley on over here, the other tensioner pulley on here. Get all these belts on, the main drive belt and the supercharger belt. I don't think I showed this coming off in stages, and maybe I should show you how it goes on in stages. Take a look at the belt routing here, around the crank, all the way around this tensioner over here. And there's this large piece here. It's got an idler pulley right here that takes the back of the belt, around the alternator, around this idler pulley, over the water pump, over that idler pulley, over that dynamic suspension pump we just replaced, and on down to the AC compressor. It does not touch much of that AC compressor, but that's how it goes. You have to have this pulley here for the supercharger and the front mechanical fan off in order to get to that bolt right there. You see how this thing turns, and you can line it up to get to that bolt. Okay, let's put this hub on the front here for the supercharger, and then we'll get the supercharger belt on. Okay, there's the supercharger belt on. You got the hub on with the 3 10mm bolts. Put the belt on, release the tension on the tensioner, got the belt on, then release the tension. Alright, I've done some other things here. You've probably noticed that the acoustic covers are on both sides, and I've ran some vacuum lines in the fuel lines. Let me bring you in closer. So right here on the driver's side, I went ahead and took the main electrical cables coming out, bolted it back down here, put it back on the computer here, and then the fuel lines coming up, I reconnected those here. Those were draped over here on the body. Put those back, and then underneath this thing is a vent tube that goes to the valve cover back here. I'm touching it. So that was this side, and then on the other side, some more stuff over here. There's another crankcase vent hose that goes into right behind the throttle body here into the intake. Then that snakes around and goes into the back of the valve cover back here. And you've got just some other vacuum lines that I snap back in. This one right here, and then it Ys into this guy right here. And then as you follow that down, it Ys right here, goes down to the vacuum pump. Okay, that is all on. I'm going to not put on the cowling yet. We're going to get this whole front end on. I'm going to get the engine running, make sure everything is nice and good before I put all the cowling on in the back. Next is some coolant hoses. I'm going to put the new thermostat on over here and start getting some coolant hoses on. And we're going to go grab the radiator and condenser and set it back in place. Fast forward a lot here. Lots going on, obviously. Got the radiator and condenser in. All the coolant pipes. I had taken so much of this off as one big chunk that it really didn't make sense to show you one by one how it went back on. Basically, I had separated it from this pipe and that pipe over there. The transmission cooler lines and these lines for the supercharger intercoolers kind of all came off together, so I just put it all back on as one piece. Let me explain a few things. So here on the passenger side, got a coolant line here, don't forget to snap that in. Got a coolant line back here, don't forget to snap that in. I think I'd already done that earlier. Upper radiator hose to this connection, and then on into our new metal pipe here. Off of this pipe is the 2 lines for the intercoolers, and another line that comes off down here that'll go to the auxiliary radiator on the passenger side. Over here it is the bleed nipple here. It's like a continuous bleed type deal that it does. There is hose here that's connected, hose here that's connected, and those Y into the brand new thermostat that's down here. That thermostat is bolted in right, we zoom in, where that green line and that T30 bolt is, right down there. That's where it's bolted in. You got a coolant line right here. That's the other side. That's the last 2 that go to the supercharger intercoolers. And everything else is like pretty intuitive. Bolted the AC line back up here. The dynamic suspension cooler here. The other AC line down here. Coolant expansion tank. It's kind of funky how you got to route it. Make sure that it goes underneath the dynamic suspension cooler here. And that's about it that I can think of. What we're going to do now is put this whole front end back on. I'm not going to show that because I've already showed that. The link to taking this off, a video showing taking all this stuff off, is going to be in the condition description below. Next video you're going to see from me is this whole front end on. Okay, couple hours later, all this stuff is on. If you want to see how to put this on, you can watch a video of me taking it off. I've got a link to that video in the condition description below. Keeping with tradition, I don't start engines and have them run and then have them start right up for you. They are not going to do that. This has got to build fuel pressure. It's going to take a long time to crank to get this thing running. There is 8.5 quarts of oil in it. It might take a little bit more because I had this engine completely apart. I topped off the adaptive suspension reservoir over here. There is no coolant in it yet. That's because I broke the coolant line that goes from here over to the overflow reservoir and then on into the engine. I got a new one of those coming, but we can crank this thing, let it run for a little bit, and make sure it's running. Okay, let's give it a try. Here's the key. I'll turn this baby on. Cross your fingers. Almost. I'm going to give it a second, let that starter cool off. I don't want to overheat the starter, so I'll be back with you in just a second.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, baby. Yeah.
Great success. You might see some smoke here in a minute. There's PB blaster that I put on, exhaust manifold, nuts, things of that nature. So it might release a little bit. You see a little bit of smoke coming out right there. That is okay. Thing sounds good. It's running smooth. It's not misfiring. Bada bing, bada boom. Okay, let's put some finishing touches on this engine here. Notice I have the intake back off. When I ran the engine, ran it without coolant. I only ran it for about 30 seconds to a minute or so. I had broken this line right here. There's a coolant overflow line that goes from the top of the radiator here, snakes across it, and goes to the coolant reservoir for the overflow. And also there's another line that tees into it here that goes to a connection right by the throttle body. So I had to remove the intake to get to this line here and clean this all up. That is all in now, so let's go ahead and put the intake back on. Okay, and the intake is back on. There are some clips for the coolant lines in the back. Don't forget those. You got this vent line that comes around here and goes underneath. That's kind of a bear to get on. Make sure that is on. And then work these guys on here. There's a bolt that goes here. I haven't put that back in yet, but I will. Let's fill the coolant. To fill the coolant on this thing, the manual recommends for a proper bleed is to get this coolant bottle higher. I imagine it's to get the level of coolant in here higher than the top of the radiator. So that makes sense for venting. So I've just lightly kind of pulled this thing up here. I removed the 8mm screw that was in here, and I'm just kind of hanging it lightly from the hood. Let's fill this thing with 50-50 mix of coolant. Okay, I got the coolant bottle really full of coolant, more than the max. I haven't even put a gallon in here yet, and it's kind of stopped. You know, you can squeeze hoses and whatnot. See, I'm making some bubbles over there. But what I'm going to do here in just a second is fire this engine up and let the water pump take this coolant out of here and start circulating it around, and as it goes down I'll just be adding more. I'm not going to film all this. It's going to take a while. Basically fire the engine up as it gets towards normal operating temperature. This is all going to get sucked down. I'm just going to keep filling it, keep this thing full so we don't interject any air bubbles, and it should bleed all of its air bubbles out through this line here that I've replaced. Okay, I'll get back with you once it's running and warmed up. One thing I do recommend while it's running is to crack this bleed screw. There's a bleed screw right here. It goes to the heater core. I forgot to mention, turn your heat on high. Turn your heat all the way up and turn the fan all the way up. And as soon as it starts blowing hot, you'll know, and you'll also get some coolant that'll burp out of here. Get all the air out of this line as well. That's important. Okay, you gotta be patient with that. I think I'm good now. Took about 2 gallons. I think I'm at 2 gallons and a little bit above the max line. That's okay in case there's any other air pockets that want to burp out and suck some fluid down. I'll be watching this very closely over the next few days as I drive this car, just to make sure it's all nice and bled out. Now it's time to recharge the air conditioning system. This is the new stuff, R1234YF. Not a big fan. I had to get all new adapters for this to fit onto the couplers up here, and this stuff's expensive. It's like I think it's over $20 a can. It's twice as expensive as 134. And you also have to get a different hand tap here. It's left-hand thread. Everything is left hand on this, so lefty tighty. And same thing with this. You got to turn this counterclockwise to screw it in and pierce the can. Well, anyway, the vacuum pump has been running for greater than a half an hour, and we are holding good pressure, negative 30 pounds on both the low and the high side. So we go and shut the vacuum pump off, hook up the can to this system and fill it. It takes 1,000 grams. I did the math. I don't remember what the math was, but it was just a hair more than 4 cans of this stuff. So I'm gonna put 4 cans in and call it good. All right, let's take this beast for a drive.
Yo, turn me up in the headphones.
Okay, driving the Range Rover. You know, it's a nice vehicle. Runs great. Excuse me if my back's moving a little bit. I got the seat massager on. It's a new vehicle to me. You know, you gotta try everything out. Air conditioning's blowing cold. There's a few issues. I'm gonna have to put a punch list together. I've got rear headliner. It's a leather headliner that needs placed back up in the back. Just some minor things. I think I'm gonna have to bleed out the suspension for the dynamic stabilizer bar pump that I replaced. That crazy $1,600 pump. That's gonna need bled out. There's a procedure that you could hook up the computer and do that. There's another way you can drive aggressively in like figure eights. What else? I cleared all the codes out of the engine for the check engine light. I did get some knock sensor codes back. I'm wondering if I didn't fully seat the connector on the knock sensors. Not a big deal. Yeah, I think this thing is ready to do its road test. I drive this thing 1,000, 2,000 miles and then decide what I'm going to do with it. Am I going to keep it? Am I going to sell it? I don't know. Probably sell it, but we'll see. I like it so far. Hey, this is going to end the video for the engine rebuild. Thanks for watching. Please like, please subscribe. If you got any questions, throw a comment down below. I'd love to hear what you have to say. And I'll catch you next time.